The wine I recall tasting in the winery in a vertical tasting was the Fratta.
Fratta, you just mentioned three wines that are all my favorite of our production.
Good.
Fratta is again the name of the vineyard area. The first vintage of that wine was 1977.
Fascinating people with stories to share, fabulous wines and the best local foods to accompany them, and beautiful places to discover and visit. All of this and more on Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast. Join me for a new episode every Tuesday. Welcome to Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on Italian Wine Podcast. Today we travel to the Veneto, to the province of Vicenza, to meet my guest Angela Maculan and to visit her well-known and iconic family Maculan Winery, located in the historic center of Breganze, which is itself an ancient wine-growing area. Buongiorno, Angela. Thanks so much for being my guest today. How are you?
Buongiorno, Marc. I'm great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being with us. It is a beautiful day in Breganze.
It's a kind of a beautiful day. We are lucky we are on the hills, so we never really get fog like sometimes it can happen in the north of Italy. It's not super sunny, but it's the winter has arrived. So this morning everything was frozen. It was white. It was quite impressive.
Oh, okay. With the frost.
Yes.
Okay. Well, following on from that description, why don't you give our listeners who are located all around the world a description of where you are, Breganze, and of the beautiful wine hills where your vineyards are located. Take us to your world.
Okay, so we are in the northeast of Italy, as you were saying, in Veneto. We are about 1 hour from Venice and 1 hour from Verona, right in the heart of the region of Veneto, in the province of Vicenza. We are 25 kilometers north of Vicenza, right at the footstep of the mountains. The mountains that are north of us is the Altopiano di Asiago, where they produce the real Asiago cheese. The mountains are not super high. They're about the Altopiano, the high plain is about 1,000 meters above the sea level, but they're high enough to protect us from the cold wind that we could get from the north. And also they give us a beautiful breeze during the summer. So it's never really too hot. Breganze is on the hills. So we are at the very end of the Pianura Padana, the flat part of the north of Italy. In the beginning, we are the first and the second row of hills. So not super high, between about 100 to 400 meters above the sea level, with mostly volcanic soil. So that's perfect for the vines. As I was saying, we are close to Vicenza. We're close to Bassano del Grappa, which is famous because they produce the grappa. They distill the pomace of the grapes. Marostica with a beautiful medieval castle, and Breganze, this cute little town where we make wine.
Okay, that's a very good description. And it is a beautiful, beautiful area, this ripple of hills leading up to quite a steep climb up to the Altopiano. I remember driving up there. And then surprisingly, it flattens out again at 1,000 meters or more gently hilly before the big mountains rise up. So you're protected from the harsher winds from the north, and you're in this beautiful area of historic towns. I remember Marostica as well. I remember the cherries from Marostica, beautiful cherries. Angela, your family has been making wine for, is it 4 generations now? Your father, of course, your father Fausto, is one of the pioneers of quality Italian wine, the renaissance of Italian wine. But your family story goes back even further. Share that with us.
So the history, the connection between my family and wine goes back more than 100 years ago, because my great grandfather used to have a little osteria, the local restaurants here in Breganze, and he was making wine for the osteria. And we go back to the early 1900s. Then during World War II, there was a law that was mandatory to provide anything you could to the army stationed in the area. So my grandfather, Giovanni, started making wine for the army with his father's equipment. And then after the war, he decided to try this new adventure and make wine the main business of the family. So in 1947, he built the winery, even if it didn't have vineyards at the time. So it was just purchasing the fruits and making the wine. This is why the winery, and you've been here, the winery is right in the center of the town because we don't have a background as farmers. The wine that my grandfather Giovanni was producing were very cheap and low quality, sold in the big bottle, 1 liter bottle with the crown cap. And the label was just saying Vino Bianco and Vino Rosso, so white wine and red wine, and then sold in the big jar in the Damigiana, the 54-liter jars. But that was the kind of wine that everybody was drinking in the 50s and 60s. You just mentioned my dad, Fausto. He was the only son, so he was literally sent to study winemaking in Conegliano. And after he graduated, he arrived at the winery, and he was not happy with the quality of the wines that my grandfather was producing. So he decided to completely change everything he could. He started going around to see and to visit the other wineries to try to catch all the secrets and taking everything he could back to Breganze. Technology, equipment for the winery, the most state of the art, press machine, filters, and everything. Let's say he fixed the phases of the production of wine at the wine during the winery, so the vinification. And then he realized pretty soon that if you want to make a top quality wine, you should start from a top quality grape, and the best way would have been having his own vineyards. So he started leasing vineyards and then with a little more money, buying land and planted more modern vineyards. And today we have about a little less than 50 hectares of vineyards that we directly manage. We still purchase a little bit of grape from farmers of the area, and the total production is about 600,000 bottles a year. Today, not today, but 2007, my sister Maria Vittoria graduated as a winemaker. So since then, she's working side by side in the vineyard managing and winemaking. And I joined my dad in the sales and marketing. I always say I'm the smile and the face of the winery.
Well, that's a really good family background, Angela. And I think it's really interesting to note the evolution of Italian wine post-war, the recovery after the fighting, because your area had a lot of fighting in it.
Yeah.
Lots of fighting and casualties and destruction. So rebuilding, your grandfather rebuilding, producing bulk wines. I remember those wines in large bottles with the crown cork, and simply just rosso, bianco. So your father's decision after studying at this very important wine institute in Conegliano to begin that road towards quality was very much at the forefront of what we now all consider, the renaissance of modern Italian wine, recovering this great patrimony. So he was a pioneer, wasn't he?
Absolutely a pioneer because my dad's first harvest as a winemaker was 1973. Even if he started, so the very first wine and the oldest bottle we have here at the winery with our label with the name on it, it's from 1970. And that was the first unofficial harvest as a winemaker from my dad. But then in 1973, he fired the previous winemaker, even if he was only 23. But I mean, it's my dad is kind of a pretty stubborn person, and he decided to fire the previous winemaker and start his own path. So definitely a pioneer. I mean, that's the 70s. It was a completely different wine world, a completely different world. And so, yes, he definitely started with many other producers of his generations, of course.
Yes, that you're right. This was a generation of pioneers that really were determined to bring Italian wine to the world's attention, not just in Italy. And I've always really admired and enjoyed the Maculan range of wines that combine tradition and also innovation. And I've also been interested that you've always, or I'm not sure how long, but you have combined grapes that we consider international, Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Chardonnay, alongside great native varieties such as the unique variety I'd like to talk about, soon Vespaiolo, but also Thai. You have this blend of a more international style as well as very, very local. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. We have to say that the what they are usually called international grape varieties or French origin grape varieties like Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, Sauvignon have always been here in the area. I mean, always more than 150 years. They've been grown in Veneto.
Since Napoleon,
In
then, when since the
yes,
French passed
yes.
through.
Yes, this is what when probably Veneto got the French origin grapes with Napoleon, and then after that, a lot of the local noble families used to go to France for vacationing, so they wanted to have the same wine they had during their holidays. So they just kept replanting the French origin grapes. In 1855, which ironically is the same years of the Bordeaux classification, in Vicenza, there was a kind of farmers' fair. So all the farmers of the area brought their produce to the exhibition and they printed the catalog of this fair. There were more than 120 different red grapes grown in Vicenza in 1855. Cabernet Sauvignon, Merlot, and Pinot Nero are in that list. So that was before phylloxera, before World War One, before Bordeaux became trendy or the Super Tuscan. So it's something that has always been here. And after World War II, as you say, that we had a lot of fighting here in the area, there was a very big push towards this international grape variety.
Okay, that's really, really important for our listeners to understand, because I think it is easy, as you say, to think that these French or international varieties have arrived recently, and in many parts of Italy, it is much more recent. The introduction of Cabernet or Merlot or or Chardonnay, but in Veneto, the roots are very deep, and in a sense, the having been there that long, they now can be considered and should be considered native varieties.
Yes, we kind of consider them native varieties, but I mean, at least the everyday red wine in the area, but not only in Vicenza, in Braganza or in Vicenza, but if you look at the variety map, the grape variety map of the northeast of Italy, you will find those grapes all over Veneto and Friuli as well. In the Verona area, it's different. There's Valpolicella and Soave, where they mainly have their own local and indigenous grape. But throughout the rest of Veneto and Friuli, the main grapes are the international grapes. Of course, we have the local. Here we have the Marzemino, the Gruaio, and then you will find, I don't know, Raboso, Refosco, and all those grapes. But the everyday glass of red wine will be a
Yeah.
Cabernet Merlot blend.
Okay. Now, what about your approach then to growing grapes? Your dad realized that to make great wine, you needed to have the highest quality fruit. What is your approach in the vineyards then?
So my dad, as you said, has always been a pioneer, and we still are pioneers. He planted high density vineyards in the 80s. And when I say high density, I'm talking about 10,000 vines per hectare. So because he went to France, because that was the place where the great wines were coming from in the 70s and 80s, and he saw that they were planting 10,000 vines per hectare. And he came back to Braganza. He had nothing to lose, and he decided. He said, "Okay, they do like that. I can do the same. I have nothing to lose, so I'm gonna try." And he planted 12 hectares of 10,000 vines per hectare vineyard in Braganza. So he went from 1,500, which was the traditional density here in the area, to 10,000. So can you imagine? We're talking about 1986 and on.
That is amazing. Was the old method of training pergola?
No, it has always been mainly like sport cotton or
Okay.
double guyot, doppia cappuccina, as we call it here, for the traditional grape, like the Vespaiola or the Thai. But pergola has never been here as a traditional
Okay.
method. And then so he started doing that. And things that we still do. We prune very short. We make a selection of the shoots in May. We green harvest, we do the leaf pulling. Of course, all the grapes are harvested by hands and selected in the vineyards. But can you imagine when a young guy, I mean, in the late 20s, early 30s, does something so innovative and so out of the tradition, like planted high density vineyards in a small town of 8,000 people, living place. Everybody was saying that my dad was crazy, but and the cutting half of the production before the ripening. And then he said, and of course, the vines were very, very short. And he used to say that his vines were bonsai vines. That was the reason why they were so short and so close to
Right.
the ground, to the soil.
So quite low yields per plant, but lots and lots of plants. I guess he would have had to buy special machinery to work the vineyard, special tractors that would have been coming from France.
Absolutely. This is what we did in the 80s. And of course, not only the machinery, the tractor that goes over the vines, but a lot of, there's so many things that you have to do by hands. So a lot of labor for these kind of vineyards. Really labor
Okay.
intense. But
Yes,
the
absolutely.
quality, as you said, it's really high. Now the vines are 30 years old, almost 40 years old. And they produce less than a bottle of wine per plant, and the quality of the grape is really, really high. So very,
Wow. So
very, absolutely amazing results.
okay. Well, let's just look at a few of your wines, a few wines that I myself have enjoyed. Can we start with the Valvolpara Vespaiolo and tell us about Vespaiolo because this is a grape you don't even find it elsewhere in Veneto. It really is very much linked in the province of Vicenza. Is that right?
It's absolutely right. Not only the Vespaiola, it's a very unique grape variety that you will find only here in Braganza, not even outside the DOC of Braganza. It's a white grape. It has, from a biological point of view, it has a very long cycle. It's the first one that buds and the last of the white grapes that we harvest. It's usually harvested in the second half of September, if it's a regular season, of course. When you harvest it, it's still pretty green, even if it's fully ripe, but it's typical of the grape variety. And it has always been here. It's mentioned for the first time in a book written in 1754, the Vespaiola from Braganza. And it's used in different ways. One is to make a dry white, but we also dry to make a dessert wine, the Torcolato. The one you mentioned, the Valvolpara Vespaiolo, it's one of, we produced two different Vespaiolo. And we started in 2017 to produce the Valvolpara because we planted this vineyard. We selected this old clone of Vespaiola and we decided to plant it on this hill with mostly tufo as a soil. The vineyard is facing east, of course, and it's just a small parcel. We produce probably 1,500 bottles of this wine, and the name of the area is called Val Volpara, and Volpe is, of course, it's fox, so it's the valley of the fox. Um, we harvest the grape and then we dry the grapes for a couple of weeks to have a little more concentration. So it's not a fully drying process. It's more than I don't know, I could say probably overripe, just to
Hmm.
lose a little bit of water and having a little more concentration. And then we cold macerate the grape before the fermentation for 5 days. Then we separate the skin. So macerato, it's not an orange wine, but it's just the regular fermentation in stainless steel tanks, and then it's aged in tanks for a few months, and then in bottle. It's our approach to the Vespaiola, the Vespaiolo, the wine, because we really believe in this grape variety because it's so characteristic and so unique. And but the Vespaiolo, the regular one, it's not a big wine. It's not a wine that made for long aging. It's a wine that has to be drunk in maybe a couple of years, more or less. Um, so the Valvolpara is our way of giving more importance or to produce a bigger Vespaiolo with more structure.
Okay, to really express that character of this
Yes.
unique grape, Vespaiola. Okay, well, let's turn to one more white
Hmm.
before we discuss other wines, but the Ferrata Chardonnay. As we say, Chardonnay, it's grown around the world, but it's been in Breganze now for a very, very long time, as we've discussed.
Hmm.
And the characteristics of your Chardonnay are unique to your vineyards. Tell us about this wine.
So the Chardonnay Ferrata comes from the 10,000 vines per hectare vineyard that we've just talked about, because that was it's one of the variety that my dad planted with high density, because he planted Chardonnay, Cabernet Sauvignon, Sauvignon, and Merlot. And the Chardonnay is planted on again east facing side of this hill where the soil is really red, like the soil has the same color as a tennis court, because it's really rich in copper and in iron, so high minerality. 10,000 vines per hectare, planted in 1986, so almost 4 years old. And the style of our Chardonnay, it's I don't know, I could say French oriented, maybe French inspired. the
I
ferm-
would say so. From my recollection, it's
yes.
a very, very elegant style of Chardonnay. Not a big, huge, overblown Chardonnay in any way, but much more restrained and elegant.
Yes, it's barrel fermented and barrel aged for 5 months in new oak. And again, it's a wine that can be saved in the cellar for 10, 15 years with no problem at all. And Ferrata, this is a characteristic of our wines. We always try to find a connection with the territory. Ferrata means railroad tracks, and this vineyard is on a street where during World War I there was the railroad tracks on. So Ferrata means recalls this the name of the area as well.
Okay. Well, let's turn now to one of your flagship red wines, because you produce some outstanding red wines as well. But the wine I recall tasting in the winery in a vertical tasting was
Hmm.
the Fratta.
Fratta, you just mentioned three wines that are all my favorite of our
Oh,
production.
good.
Fratta is again the
Oh,
name of the vineyard area. The first vintage of that wine was 1977, which was a terrible vintage for wine, generally speaking. But my dad has this amazing Cabernet, and he wanted to vinify it by himself. And he started, and this is when he started using the name of the areas of the vineyards to as the name of the wine. Before that, as I said, we went from Vino Bianco and Vino Rosso, then to in the 70s we my dad used the name of the grape variety, so Cabernet, Pinot Bianco, Merlot, and then in 1977 he started using the name of the vineyard area to identify the name. So Frata has always been our top wine. It's a Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot blend. It always the percentages slightly change every year, but it's always mostly Cabernet Sauvignon. We're always around 70% Cabernet and 30% Merlot. The fermentation goes on in stainless steel tanks. We don't like doing long maceration, only 7 days, because we don't want to extract the bitter tannins. And then Frata is aged for 18 months in predominantly new French oak. Uh, what we do is, as I said, we have about 50 hectares. They're all in different areas of the DOC on the hills. Every vineyard, every parcel is harvested and vinified, separate one from the other. So at the end of the harvest, we will have probably 25, 30 different lots of wine. We blind taste all of them every month, month and a half. And about a year after the beginning of the aging, we will do the final tasting and pick the best Cabernet and the best Merlot, and we will use them to produce Fratta. And then we will go on with the other wines of our
okay. So
portfolio.
it's really the top flagship of the Maculan Winery.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So potentially all the grapes can become fratta, but at the end of the day, the wine that we select for fratta
Okay.
always come from the same
Okay.
vineyard.
Well, that's a really good overview of not just the wines, but of the approach that you take to crafting these beautiful wines that are so expressive of your terroir. Final wine I'd like to talk about is one you've already mentioned, and possibly for many listeners, the most famous of your wines. And I'm talking, of course, of Torcolato, which is this one of the greatest Italian dessert wines and has been an iconic dessert wine for a very long time now, again, with this unique grape variety. So tell us the story of Torcolato. Tell us how you make it and what the wine is like.
How much time do we have? There's so many things about torcolato. Try to make it short. So torcolato is the name of this dessert wine, as you explained, made out of the Vespaiola grape, this unique grape variety that we have here. So it's um, we harvest the Vespaiola, as I said, around the middle of September, and then we dry the grapes at the winery for 4 months. So from September to January, the grape lose about 70% of the weight. So the yield is very low. Just to give you an idea, to produce a 750 bottle of white wine, you need 1 kilo of grape. To make the same quantity, so 750 bottle of torcolato, you need 4 kilos of fresh grape. So 4 times the grape, because the loss of the losing of water is so high. The sugar goes up to 35%. Then we squeeze the grapes in January, fermentation in stainless steel tanks, and then our torcolato is aged for about a year in Pernod Parius French oak. And the result is this amazing wine with a lot of aromas that goes from dry apricots, honey, all these notes, a little bit of spicy from the sweet spices from the oak. And it's sweet, but not sweet. Luigi Veronelli, I mean, described the torcolato as sweet, dolce, non dolce. So sweet, not sweet, because it's a sweet wine, of course. It's a dessert wine. It's meant to be sweet, but the Vespaiola, and that's the main characteristic of this grape, has a very bright acidity that balances the residual sugar that's in the torcolato. So it's sweet, but it's not cloying, it's not syrupy, it's really pleasant, and also easy to be paired with many desserts and many different food as well, because we don't have to forget cheese as well paired with the torcolato. And it's a wine that has always been made. When I said that Vespaiola is mentioned in a book written in 1754, it's mentioned as the torcolato. So the Vespaiola from Breganze is a liqueur wine, so a sweet
Oh, that's
wine.
fascinating that it was a historical wine made with the Pasito grapes, then going back very many centuries ago, even.
Yes, there's a very long and big history of passito of dessert wines in Veneto. I could talk for hours about sweet wine, but maybe next time.
What does the name Torcolato mean? Does that have a meaning?
Absolutely, yes. So torcolato, the word torcolato will appear for the first time in 1848, and that's the name of the wine. It refers to the traditional way of drying the grapes, because when you say passito, everybody thinks about the straw mats that they use in other areas. Here, the traditional way is different. The people in the past would use a rope, a string. They will put a bunch, a cluster of Vespaiola, and then turn at least a couple of times the string, and then put another bunch, and so on. And you create a kind of a braid, like you can do for dried tomatoes or dried red peppers or garlic, that kind of drying method. And you would hang this grape from the ceiling.
Okay, hanging like a curtain then.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And that was the traditional way that farmers used to, because torcolato was made by every family here in the area. But using that way, you optimize the space, because first of all, you don't need any storage space for the straw mats, because you need to put them somewhere when you're not using during the summer. And if you have this braid, this curtain, you take the whole braid and you put it into the torchio, the old wood press machine, and you throw away everything. Plus, in the past, people didn't have refrigeration or preservatives. So to have something sweet during the winter, they would dry everything. And if you hang the grapes from the ceiling, you can still put other stuff underneath to dry, like apple, pears, nuts, grain. So you definitely optimize the space.
Okay, so it's really going back to the country traditions of your area of Braganza and of Veneto.
Yes, very long tradition. As I said, more than 250 years of history and tradition that when my dad took over from my grandfather, he wanted a unique wine, something to be known for. And wanted something unique and something traditional and historical and typical of the area. So 250 years of history, unique because it's made with the Vespaiola, and Braganza is the only place where you will find the Vespaiola. So he fixed all the different phases of the process and he came out with this I usually say modern version of the torcolato, and that was 1977. And with that wine is torcolato 1977 is the first wine that we exported in 1981 to the US.
Amazing.
This is when our this quality history
Yes, that
started.
is amazing. And it is a wine that has gone around the world, and wine lovers who've been able to enjoy it will know this very special wine, often found in a half bottle because it is such a special wine and such a concentrated dessert wine. Angela, we've got a little bit of time left to briefly turn to gastronomy. Your wines, a Maculan range of wines, like I think most Italian wines, if not all Italian wines, are wines that are made to be enjoyed with food. Can we talk a little bit about the gastronomy of Breganze, the gastronomy of Vicenza, or of your area, and some of the typical dishes that particularly pair well with your wines?
Absolutely. So I always like to start with the not typical of Breganze, but of Vicenza, with the baccalà alla vicentina. Baccalà is the stockfish, so it's cod. Typically, we use the air dried from Norway. So you basically rehydrate the fish for 3 days, and then you cut it in pieces, and you prepare. You saute some white onion. This is my family's recipe, of course, because all the traditional recipes in Italy, every family has its own version, right?
Of course.
So I remember my great aunties used to prepare this white onion saute in olive oil, and then they were putting all the pieces of the stockfish, and then you will cover it with olive oil and milk, half and half, and you will cook it slowly, cook for 4 or 5 hours until it almost fall apart. And you can imagine how rich and intense and I also would say greasy is this dish. And the typical pairing is with the Vespaiolo because, as I said, it has a bright acidity that cleans the palate and it's perfect with some rich
Oh,
fishes.
that sounds wonderful, and it is one of the great dishes of the Veneto. I think the baccalà alla vicentina, and I urge all our listeners to try and sample this, and especially to sample it with a Vespaiola wine. What about you mentioned a town early in our conversation of Bassano del Grappa. What about the famous white asparagus? Asparagus is very difficult usually to pair with wine.
So the white asparagus from Bassano, they are DOP asparagus. They are amazing. They're usually cooked alla bassanese, so it means they are boiled. Of course, they will be boiled standing with the top not covered by water, and you prepare kind of sauce with eggs. So you not fully boiled. I don't know the English word. Sorry for that, but not fully boiled, not completely solid eggs. You squeeze it, you smash it, and you put a little bit of olive oil and, of course, salt and pepper, and you prepare this kind of sauce, and you will eat it with the white asparagus. So Another pairing for the Vespaiolo when it's in season, so in springtime, will be with the white asparagus alla Bassanese, because some of the vegetal notes of the Vespaiolo are the same as the asparagus, and at the same time, the acidity will balance the egg.
Okay, that's a good description. And they are these big, fat, white spears of asparagus, some of the best I've ever tasted. And I've had it exactly as you described, this almost a mash of the soft-boiled eggs with the olive oil also comes from the province of Vicenza generally. Is that right?
It's correct. We also make our own olive oil. So we are traditionally and historical this area because of the climate that we have here in Braganza. It's the northern part of Italy, if you don't consider, of course, the Lake Garda, where historically olive trees were grown. So we have 100 years old olive trees, and we make our own olive oil as well. It's delicate with a little hint of spiciness. It's really, really good.
Okay, that's also important because we don't think of Veneto really, apart from the perhaps the Lake Garda oils, as olive oil, extra virgin, quality extra virgin olive oil coming from Veneto because we don't see it very often. I think you must use it all yourselves and keep it jealously.
We don't have a very big production, but being on the hillside area of the province, you cannot plant vines all over the hills. So typically, you will save the best and the smoothest area or side of the hill for the vines, and then you will plant the olive trees where you cannot go with the tractors or the machinery, because again, olive trees needs a lot of labor.
Of course, of course. Now, what about the most typical local dish to have with one of your great red wines?
Are you referring to the Torresani allo spiedo, maybe?
Perhaps.
So another traditional and historical dish. These areas on the hills, we used to have in the medieval times a lot of towers for protection, and after they were not used for with this purpose. They will close. The people would close the top floor, and they create a special room where they were raising pigeons, used not only for communication, but pigeon has always been a very rich dish, food for noble people. Here in the area, we call them torresani. Tower means torre. So they are pigeons that haven't left the nest yet. They're almost ready to fly away. And we cook them on the spit for 3-4 hours, and we eat, of course, with polenta, because what else? They're not like the French pigeon. It's they're fully cooked, so they're not rare, and they're amazing with the Cabernet that we make here.
I've only had that once, but it is just as you describe, a really amazing, an amazing local food that you just don't find anywhere else cooked in this way. And as you say, polenta being the bread of Veneto, polenta being a staple that's so loved by everybody and eaten widely. Final wine, then, what would be one special dessert to have with torcolato?
My suggestion would be the 2 years old Asiago cheese, but the typical dessert of the area is we call it macafame. It's again a very traditional dessert cake made with the old bread. When it becomes too hard to be eaten, you will put it in milk, and then you will use apples, raisins, and pine nuts, and you create this cake, and you bake, of course.
Oh, wow.
So it's rich. It's the tradition. People in Veneto has always been poor and farmers, so they would always have to make the best out of everything they could. So using the leftovers to make this
Oh,
cake.
that sounds delicious. I've not had that. Angela, final question then. Can our listeners visit the Maculan Winery?
Yes, the Maculan Winery is open for visits. They need to make a reservation from Monday to Friday and on Saturday mornings. We usually take our visitors and we through the winery and we describe the production of wine in every single step, and then they can taste whatever they want.
Okay, well, that's and I urge our listeners to find this historic and pioneering winery when traveling through Veneto. As you've said, you're about an hour from Venice or from Verona, situated in a beautiful, beautiful area. So it's certainly a wine estate that all lovers of Italian wine and of the story of Italian wine should make an effort to visit. Angela, it's been a real pleasure meeting you again here. I haven't been to your winery now in a good few years. I think it was 2017 when I last visited. So I look forward to seeing you again sometime soon.
Please, Mark, you will be more than welcome to come, and we will go for some amazing local food that you haven't tried yet. I hope
that sounds wonderful.
I hope to host you here very soon.
That would be great. I look forward to it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Angela. A presto.
Grazie, Mark. A presto. Ciao.
We hope today's episode of Wine, Food and Travel with me, Marc Millon, on the Italian Wine Podcast has transported you to somewhere special. Please remember to like, share, and subscribe wherever you get your pods. Likewise, you can visit us at italianwinepodcast.com. Until next time, chin chin.